Hello and welcome to State of the Union. I'm Stefan Grobe in Brussels. 20 years ago this week, the European Union saw the biggest enlargement round ever. On May the 1st, 2004, 10 states simultaneously joined the bloc, 7 of them from beyond the former Iron Curtain. Some called it the Big Bang. In a rather mute celebration, the European institutions in Brussels, Strasbourg and Luxembourg were lit up for the occasion this week. I'd love to show you pictures of popular joy, but there weren't any. Instead, in a very business-like manner, the President of the Council advocated more members.
Enlargement is vital for the future of the EU because without enlargement, this is in fact a risk for a new Iron Curtain, and this would be extremely dangerous if you would have an unstable neighborhood with a lack of prosperity, a lack of economic development.
Well, whether countries like Serbia, Georgia or Ukraine will get a seat at the Brussels table anytime soon is doubtful. In the ongoing election campaign for the European Parliament, enlargement is not a hot topic, to put it mildly. Speaking of the campaign, this week people started speculating about a new political alliance, previously unheard of, namely a coalition of centre-right and far-right parties. When asked about it during a debate, the Commission President and centre-right candidate had this to say.
It depends very much on how the composition of the parliament is and who is in what group.
What?
This fits well with a statement by the far-right Prime Minister of Italy, who would love to team up with von der Leyen's European People's Party.
Oltre a essere il presidente di Fratelli d'Italia, io sono anche la leader dei conservatori europei, che vogliono avere un ruolo decisivo nel cambiare rotta alle politiche europee.
Meloni's party leads the polls in her country, and she aims to replicate the scheme at power in Italy, an alliance of EPP and far-right groups ECR and Identity and Democracy. Polls suggest that the next European Parliament will shift to the far right, as nationalist and populist parties seem to be gaining ground. Some observers already predict a legislative agenda paralyzed by a solid right-wing bloc. Well, a recent analysis shows that there are a lot of cracks in this bloc. Joining me now is Pavel Serka, Senior Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations and the lead analyst on European public opinion. Welcome to the program.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, your recent polling suggests deep divisions between Europe's far-right parties. How, for example, does this play out when it comes to support for Ukraine?
This is one of the areas where the parties of the far right will struggle to agree, not just far right, Eurosceptics as well. So obviously there are some parties like the Alternative for Deutschland or Geert Wilders' party in the Netherlands, who are much more on the side of no longer supporting Ukraine and seeing the European current support as warmongering. But there are parties, of course, like Polish Law and Justice, which are strongly supportive of Ukraine. And even in Italy, Giorgia Meloni has shown to be a strong transatlanticist and a reliable supportive of a European line of support for Ukraine.
What about a hypothetical exit from the EU? Isn't that a pet project that all nationalist parties are plotting?
It's no longer that fashionable in Europe, and many of the far right or anti-European or Eurosceptic parties have chosen right now to focus on repairing Europe from inside rather than leaving the EU.
We're just weeks away from election day. What would be a strategy to counter the far right in the election campaign?
The problem I see right now is that many of the parties of the far right have the electorates which are strongly mobilized. So their voters believe that these are important elections and they largely want to go and vote. Whereas the electorates of the pro-European side are often quite demobilized, as if people didn't understand what are the stakes of this election. Why should it matter? So my main recommendation for the leaders of pro-European parties is to express quite clearly to their voters why those elections are important.
I want to ask you about these voters of far-right parties. You mentioned them. Can they actually be swayed? Can they still be swayed?
Rarely. I think that the question is mostly about whether they will be strongly mobilized or whether some of them could stay at home. If the pro-European side reminds the voters about various risks that voting for AfD in Germany, Marine Le Pen in France, or Kaczynski in Poland bring, then perhaps some of the people who are currently saying, yes, I would like to vote for those parties, maybe they will think twice.
All right. Pavel Zerka, Senior Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks again.
We're now a week away from one of the biggest European events of the year. I'm not talking about an election, but the European Song Contest, hosted by the Swedish city of Malmö. While technical and artistic preparations are well underway, the event is causing major headaches for the Swedish security authorities. In a 23-page report, most of it classified, law enforcement summarizes serious threats to the competition, like cyber attacks, denial of service attacks, or civil unrest. Authorities are also coping with the fact that Sweden is a prime target for violent Islamist terrorist organizations. In addition, major protests against Israel's participation in the contests are expected. The Swedish police believes they are prepared for all kinds of scenarios. They hope the European Song Contest proceeds smoothly. And I guess they also want Sweden not to win this time, so that someone else can host the event next year. That's it for this edition. I'm Stefan Grobe. Thank you for watching. Have an excellent week.